My name is Clara Winslow, and I am 85 years old. People think age makes you invisible. They see your gray hair, your slow steps, and they assume you've got nothing left to say. They assume you're just a background figure in family photos, a sweet old lady who bakes pies and nods politely. But what they don't see is the weight you carry, the secrets you've buried, the truth you've swallowed for so long it's etched into the lines on your face. For 70 years I carried his secret. Not because I wanted to, but because he told me if I ever spoke it aloud, I'd destroy the family. And I believed him. I protected his name, his reputation, his precious image. Played my part. I smiled in photographs, poured coffee at reunions, laughed at jokes that made me sick inside. But the day everything changed began with a slip. A single sentence, spoken without caution, overheard by the wrong ears. It was my grandson's engagement party. The Winslows gathered in full force, crowding into a rented hall draped with string lights and white roses. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, music played low in the background. I sat at the edge of the room, watching my grandson Thomas beam as he introduced his fiancée to aunts and uncles who bombarded her with questions. Beside me sat Harold Winslow, my husband, my captor, the man whose shadow I had lived in since I was 15 years old. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. His smile never faltered, but his words were a dagger. Don't forget what I told you, Clara. If you ever breathe a word of what I did, you'll be the one who tears this family apart. You'll be the villain, not me. Remember that. My heart hammered. 70 years, and still he wielded the threat like a weapon. I turned, meeting his eyes. They were cold, sharp, filled with the same smug certainty I had endured all my life. He was untouchable. He believed it. He always had. But what he didn't realize was that someone else had hurt him. Anna, my eldest granddaughter, was standing a few feet away, balancing 2 glasses of champagne. Her smile faltered, her eyes narrowing as she caught the edge of his words. "Grandma," she asked carefully. What did he mean by that? The world seemed to tilt. Harold chuckled, waving it off. Nothing. She's hard of hearing. Misunderstands things. But Anna's gaze stayed locked on me. Curious. Concerned. And for the first time in 70 years, I felt something shift inside me. I had lived my life terrified of what would happen if I spoke. But in that moment, with my granddaughter's eyes searching mine, I realized silence had already destroyed me. Maybe it was time to see what would happen if I told the truth. That night, as the family danced and toasted, I sat quietly in my chair, watching Harold hold court with his sons and nephews. His laughter boomed, his hand gestures wide, the picture of a proud patriarch. No one else knew the rot beneath the surface. No one else knew what he had done to me, what he had stolen, what I had buried to keep the family intact. But I knew. And Anna suspected. And soon the whole family would know. When the party ended, Harold squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. "Remember your place, Clara." I met his gaze and, for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. Inside, a storm was brewing. The kind of storm that doesn't pass quietly. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. When people talk about marriage in the old days, they call it simpler times. They paint it with soft brushstrokes. Young love, long courtships, vows kept until death. What they don't tell you is that sometimes, marriage wasn't a love story. Sometimes it was a trap, one that snapped shut around a girl before she even understood what freedom meant. That was my story. I met Harold Winslow when I was 15 years old. He was 23 then, already working in his father's construction business, already wearing pressed shirts and a smirk that said he knew how to get what he wanted. I was still in school, still writing in a diary with a pink ribbon tied around the cover, still daydreaming about a future that seemed wide open. My father adored Harold. He said he was a man with promise. Strong, ambitious, dependable. Exactly the kind of husband a girl like me should be grateful for. I didn't understand what that meant then. I just knew that when Harold walked me home from church one Sunday, his hand brushing mine, everyone smiled approvingly. My mother baked an extra pie that night. My father shook Harold's hand as though a deal had already been struck. And in a way it had. By 16 I was engaged. By 18 I was married. The cracks began on our wedding night. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, still in my lace dress, my hands folded tightly in my lap. I was nervous, shy, unsure. Harold sat beside me, his arm heavy across my shoulders. "You're mine now," he said simply, as if he were claiming a piece of land. "And you'll do what's needed to keep this family together." It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a contract, demand. And I signed it silently with my obedience. At first, his cruelties were small. When I burned the bread one evening, he chuckled. "You'll learn, Clara. Don't be so careless." When I suggested we save for a vacation, he scoffed. "Vacations are for men who don't work hard enough at home." When I wanted to visit my sister in another town, he frowned. "Your place is here. Don't go running off." Each remark seemed harmless on its own, but together they wove a net around me. By the time I realized it, I was tangled too tightly to move. Then came the silences. Harold had a way of making me feel small without saying a word. If I said something he disagreed with at the dinner table, he wouldn't argue. He would simply stare at me, lips pressed tight, until the room fell quiet. If I cried, he would roll over in bed, muttering, "Stop your nonsense, Clara." It was as though my feelings were an inconvenience, a buzzing fly he could swat away with indifference. I told myself it wasn't so bad. He didn't strike me. He didn't drink. He worked hard. That was more than some women had. But deep inside I knew. I was disappearing. The family came quickly. 3 children in 6 years. I poured myself into motherhood, because it was the only place I felt alive. My children needed me, clung to me, loved me without condition. Their little hands grasping mine, their sleepy voices calling Mama in the dark. Those were the moments that reminded me I was more than Harold's shadow. But even then, Harold found ways to steal my joy. When our oldest, Michael, brought home a drawing from school, Harold barely glanced at it. "Won't pay the bills." When our daughter Ruth cried over a scraped knee, Harold told her to toughen up. When our youngest, Henry, hugged me tight, Harold muttered, "You'll turn him soft if you coddle him like that." He demanded respect from the children, but he never gave them tenderness. He wanted to be the patriarch, the unchallenged voice of authority. And he got it, because I made sure the children didn't cross him. Not because I believed he deserved their respect, but because I was terrified of what would happen if they didn't. The betrayal that defined my life wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small cuts. It was watching my children tiptoe around their father. It was lying to my friends at church, telling them Harold was a good man. It was biting my tongue when he dismissed me, belittled me, erased me. And it was the threat he carried like a weapon. "If you ever tell anyone what I've done, Clara, you'll destroy this family." What he meant by "what I've done" was never spoken aloud. It didn't have to be. We both knew. It was the things he did behind closed doors. The control. The cruelty. The way he reminded me again and again that I was his possession, not his partner. And so I stayed quiet. I convinced myself that silence was protection. That if I just endured, the family would stay intact. But the truth is, my silence was the glue that kept his power in place. By the time my children were grown, Harold's grip had loosened in some ways and tightened in others. He no longer cared about controlling every meal, every conversation. But he still controlled the narrative. At family gatherings, he bragged about his success, his children, his grandchildren. He painted himself as the patriarch who had sacrificed everything for us. And I, sitting beside him, nodding, smiling, was the proof. The silent wife. The evidence that his version of the story must be true. Because if it wasn't, why hadn't I spoken? That question haunted me more than anything else. Why hadn't I spoken? The answer was simple. 'Cause I believed him. I believed that if I told the truth, if I said out loud what he had done, who he really was, I would be the one who shattered everything. That my children would turn on me. That my grandchildren would look at me with disgust. That the family I had fought so hard to protect would collapse. And I would be the one blamed. So I swallowed the truth. Until that day at the engagement party, when Anna overheard his threat. Her voice echoed in my mind long after the music faded and the hall emptied. "Grandma, what did he mean by that?" It was the question I had feared for 70 years. The question that forced me to see my silence for what it was. Not protection but chains. And as I lay in bed that night, Harold's snores rattling the dark, I realized something terrifying. If I didn't speak now, I never would. And if I died with the truth still buried, then Harold Winslow would win. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. There's a difference between cruelty and betrayal. Cruelty cuts you down, belittles you, makes you smaller. But betrayal takes the trust you gave willingly and poisons it. It turns every memory sour, makes you doubt not just the person but yourself. For 70 years, I told myself Harold's cruelty was survivable. But the betrayal, the truth I buried to protect him, that was the wound that never healed. The betrayal began when I was still a girl, barely 18. Our wedding had been rushed, celebrated with pie and punch in the church basement, laughter echoing off cinder-block walls. People clapped our backs, calling us a beautiful couple, saying Harold would take good care of me. I smiled, cheeks burning, while inside I felt a gnawing unease I couldn't name. That unease became clear on our wedding night. Harold didn't treat me like a bride. He treated me like property. He reminded me that my body belonged to him now, that my duty was to him, that my no meant nothing. I learned quickly that in our marriage, I had no voice, no choice. But worse, I learned that I couldn't tell anyone. Because when I tried, when I confided in my mother weeks later, whispering through tears, she put her hand over mine and said, "Clara, don't speak of such things. You'll ruin your marriage before it's even begun. Be a good wife. Endure." And when I confronted Harold, trembling, he leaned close, his voice low and venomous. "If you ever tell anyone what happens between us, Clara, you'll destroy this family. They'll look at you as the problem, not me. You'll be the one they hate." I was 18. I believed him. That was the beginning of my silence. Year after year I endured. Nights when he took what wasn't offered. Days when he reminded me I was nothing without him. Moments when I wanted to run, but stayed because I thought leaving would shatter the family. And the children, God, the children. That was the sharpest edge of the betrayal. 'Cause they never knew. Michael, Ruth, and Henry grew up thinking their father was stern but respectable, gruff but hardworking. They saw his booming laugh at barbecues, his firm handshakes, the way people nodded with respect when he entered a room. They didn't see the way he cornered me in the kitchen, whispering threats through clenched teeth. They didn't see the way my hands trembled when I set his plate down, praying he wouldn't find fault. And I made sure they didn't. Because I believed the lie. That if I spoke, I would destroy them. That I would be the one who ruined their lives, not him. The years blurred together, my silence hardening into habit. But the letters in the box, the ones I found decades later, made me realize Harold's betrayal wasn't just in what he did to me behind closed doors. It was in how he built a second life outside of ours. I found receipts for hotel rooms 2 towns over. Jewelry I never received. Deeds for land I never saw. And then, tucked between bank statements, a photograph. Harold, younger, grinning with his arm around a woman who was not me. All those years he had sneered at me, belittled me, told me I was unworthy. He had been giving his tenderness, his charm to someone else. And I had been the one protecting him, smiling beside him, making sure no one knew. But the breaking point came much later, at that engagement party. When Anna overheard his threat. If she speaks, she'll destroy the family. It was as if the floor gave way beneath me. Because suddenly, I saw the truth I had refused to see for 70 years. It was never me who could destroy the family. It was him. That night, I sat alone in my room, the echoes of laughter from the party still ringing in my ears. I spread the evidence across my bed. The letters, the receipts, the photographs. Proof of his infidelity. Proof of his lies. Proof of the monster behind the mask. And yet I wept. I wept because I was 85 years old and only just realizing how much of my life had been stolen. I wept because my children had grown up believing their father was a good man, while I had swallowed the truth like poison. I wept because I had become complicit in my own destruction, keeping silent for so long that I no longer knew who I was without his shadow. The betrayal wasn't just what Harold did to me. It was that he convinced me to carry it for him. To hold his secret like a shield, protecting his reputation while it ate me alive. To play the part of the loyal wife while he smirked, knowing I'd never break. And the cruelest part. He was right. For 70 years I didn't break. Till now. I sat on that bed, clutching a photograph in my trembling hands, and whispered into the silence. I can't do this anymore. The truth was a storm inside me, pressing against my ribs, clawing at my throat. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I spoke. I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. The next morning, Harold sat at the breakfast table, sipping his coffee, flipping through the paper as if the world belonged to him. I looked at him, the man who had stolen my youth, silenced my voice, poisoned my marriage, and I knew something had shifted forever. I couldn't protect him any longer, even if it meant destroying everything. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The night after the engagement party, I sat in the dark with the box of evidence spread across my lap. The letters, the receipts, the photographs, all of it a map of Harold's betrayal, spanning decades. For years, I had told myself there was nothing I could do. That silence was safety. That protecting him meant protecting my children, my grandchildren, the Winslow name. But now, staring at those papers, I saw it clearly for the first time. Silence had never protected anyone but Harold. It hadn't protected me. It hadn't protected the children. It hadn't even protected the family. All it had done was keep his secrets intact while I withered in the shadows. And suddenly, the thought of going to my grave still carrying his sins was unbearable. I didn't leap into action overnight. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about rage. It was about patience, calculation. Harold had spent a lifetime controlling the narrative. He believed he was untouchable because I had made him untouchable. If I was going to take him down, I couldn't just speak. I had to make sure when I spoke, no one could ignore me. The first step was to test the waters. I started small with Anna. She was the one who had overheard Harold's threat at the party. She was the one who had looked at me with suspicion, with concern. One afternoon I asked her to visit. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the curtains, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Anna, I began, my voice shaking. Do you remember what your grandfather said at the party? She nodded. I've been thinking about it ever since. I took a deep breath. He spent his life telling me that if I ever spoke about what he's done, I'd destroy the family. But the truth is, it was him who destroyed us long ago. Anna's eyes widened. Grandma, what do you mean? For a moment fear gripped me. I wanted to fold, to retreat into silence like I always had. But then I saw her face. Earnest, worried, loving, and the words tumbled out. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. I told her about the box. The letters. The second life he had built while I smiled beside him. Her hand flew to her mouth. All this time, I whispered. She reached across the table, squeezing my trembling fingers. Grandma, you can't carry this alone anymore. We need to tell the others. The word wrapped around me like a lifeline. For 70 years it had always been him against me. But now, for the first time, I wasn't alone. The second step was gathering allies. Over the next few weeks, Anna came by often. Sometimes she brought her fiancé, who listened quietly, his jaw clenched. Sometimes she came alone, helping me organize the papers into neat files. You need to show them, Grandma, she urged. The whole family. They need to see who he really is. The thought terrified me. For decades, Harold had convinced me that speaking the truth would make me the villain. What if he was right? What if they turned on me? But the more I looked at the evidence, the more I realized. If they still chose to defend him after seeing it, then it wasn't me destroying the family. It was their choice. The third step was timing. It had to be a moment Harold couldn't spin or silence. A moment when everyone was watching. And fate handed it to me on a silver platter. The Winslow family reunion. Every summer, our entire clan gathered at Harold's insistence. He loved playing the role of patriarch, presiding over long tables piled with food, giving speeches about family values and the Winslow legacy. This year would be no different, except it would. Because this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly beside him, smiling while he soaked in admiration. This time I was going to end him. In the days leading up to the reunion, I prepared meticulously. Anna helped me digitize the letters and photographs, arranging them into a slideshow. Page after page of evidence. His secret deeds, his infidelity, his cruelty, woven between the glossy family portraits he adored so much. I practiced my words in the mirror late at night. My voice trembled at first, but with each rehearsal it grew steadier. You said I'd destroy the family if I spoke, I whispered to my reflection. But the truth is, you destroyed it long ago. And today they will see. The night before the reunion, Harold sat in his chair, sipping whiskey, boasting about how this year's gathering would be the best yet. You'll sit beside me, Clara, he said. You'll smile. You'll play your part. That's what you're good for. I looked at him, my face calm, my heart pounding with the storm brewing beneath. Yes, Harold, I said softly. I'll play my part. He smirked, satisfied. He had no idea his final act was about to begin. The morning of the reunion, the air buzzed with heat and anticipation. Tents were set up in the park, long tables draped with tablecloths, coolers filled with soda and beer. Children darted between picnic blankets, laughter ringing out. Harold arrived in his pressed shirt, his hair slicked back, strutting like a king surveying his court. People clapped him on the back, calling him the rock of the family. He beamed, basking in it. I followed a few steps behind, binder in hand, my heart hammering. This was it. The moment I'd been silenced against for 70 years. The moment I'd finally speak. As the food was served and the chatter quieted, Harold rose to his feet. He tapped his glass, his voice booming. Another year, another chance to celebrate this family. A family I've built, protected, and sacrificed for. Cheers erupted. Glasses clinked. He smiled, raising his arms like a preacher. And that was when I stood. The chatter stilled. Heads turned. Harold frowned, confused. I held the binder tight to my chest, my voice trembling but clear. For 70 years I've been silent. For 70 years I've protected you, Harold. But today I protect myself instead. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Harold's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Clara," he hissed, "sit down." But I didn't. I stepped forward, binder in hand, heart racing, ready to unleash everything. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The park grew silent. Children stopped running. The clatter of silverware stilled. All eyes were on me. Clara Winslow, 85 years old, standing with a binder clutched to my chest. "For 70 years, I said, my voice carrying across the tables. "I've been silent. I told myself I was protecting the family. I told myself I was protecting you, Harold. But the truth is, my silence only protected a lie." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cousin coughed. Anna's hand gripped her fiancé's arm. Her eyes locked on me with fierce encouragement. Harold's face flushed red. He stepped forward, his voice low but dangerous. "Clara, enough." I opened the binder and turned to the first page. Letter. His mistress's words from decades ago. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. "You make me feel alive in ways she never could. One day maybe, she'll disappear and we'll finally be free." The crowd sucked in a collective breath. Faces shifted from confusion to horror to disbelief. "Lies!" Harold barked, his voice shaking. "Old nonsense. She doesn't know what she's talking about." But I turned another page. Receipts. Photographs of Harold with another woman. One by one, the illusions he had crafted for decades crumbled. Murmurs broke out. "Is this true? How long? My God!" Michael, our eldest, stood slowly. His hands balled into fists. "Dad, is this real?" Harold sputtered. "She's making it up. She's bitter, she's." But then he faltered. Because the evidence was undeniable. The letters, dates, photos, decades of betrayal laid bare in the middle of the family reunion. He had once used to glorify himself. My daughter Ruth pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. All these years. Henry, our youngest, looked stricken, his jaw tight as he turned away from his father. And then came Anna's voice, clear and unwavering. "She's not lying. I heard him at the engagement party. He threatened her. Said if she spoke, she'd destroy us." Dozens of eyes swung back to Harold. And for the first time in my life I saw it. The fear in his eyes. "You said I'd destroy the family if I spoke," I told him, my voice rising with every word. "But it was never me. It was you. You destroyed us years ago with your lies, your cruelty, your betrayals. I carried your secret like a stone in my chest until it nearly crushed me. But today," I closed the binder with a snap. I lay it down. The silence broke like glass. Michael stormed forward, his voice shaking with fury. "How could you? To her, to us." Ruth sobbed openly, shaking her head. "All this time, Dad. All this time we thought." Henry's voice was quiet, but sharp as a knife. "You don't deserve this family." Relatives whispered harshly, some turning away in disgust, others glaring openly at Harold. His kingdom, his carefully curated image, collapsed in a single afternoon. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. Harold's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. His chest heaved, his face pale beneath the rage. He looked at me, his eyes wild. You ruined me." I met his gaze steadily, 70 years of silence finally broken. "No, Harold. You ruined yourself. All I did was tell the truth." He stumbled back, collapsing into his chair, his hands gripping the arms as if to steady himself. No one went to him. Not one child. Not one grandchild. For the first time, Harold Winslow was truly alone. The reunion didn't end in laughter that year. It ended in silence, in fractured conversations, in tears shed beneath oak trees while children were hurried home. I stayed until the last table was cleared, Anna by my side, my binder heavy in my lap. When Harold finally shuffled past me toward the car, his eyes averted, I felt no triumph. What I felt was release. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered in the grocery store. Old friends looked at Harold with suspicion instead of admiration. His name, once a badge of pride, became a shadow. Michael barely spoke to him. Ruth refused to visit. Henry wrote him a letter saying simply, "I see you now. And I don't like what I see." The family didn't destroy me, as Harold had promised. They destroyed him. And me. For the first time in my life I breathed freely. I spent mornings in the garden, my hands in the dirt, the sun warm on my back. I laughed with Anna without fear, told stories to my great-grandchildren without feeling like a fraud. The secret no longer owned me. I was Clara Winslow. Not Harold's shadow. Not Harold's shield. Me. One evening I sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. For 70 years, I had silenced myself to keep the family intact. But speaking the truth hadn't destroyed them. It had freed them. And it had freed me. So when people ask me now, "Clara, do you regret it? Do you regret telling them?" I smile, my eyes finally clear, and I say, "No. I regret waiting 70 years. I regret letting him convince me I was the problem. But telling the truth, that saved me. For decades, Harold Winslow convinced me I was the one who'd break the family if I told the truth. But the truth didn't break us, it broke him. And it set me free. I am Clara Winslow, and at 85 I finally protected myself. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of betrayal, justice, and resilience. Because sometimes, the silence that protects them is the very thing that destroys us, until we choose to speak.